Employers and managers who had to fire someone on their very first day. What happened? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like and comment something related to the topic. Let's begin. Story 1. I worked at a popular clothing store for teens and college kids. I wasn't the manager, but I was in charge of training new hires. There was this one girl who used to shop there all the time, and we were actually excited when she got hired. She ended up getting fired because she showed up late, was caught trying on clothes instead of greeting customers, and apparently laughed whenever someone asked for a size larger than a medium. At the end of her shift, her family showed up and tried to buy between $2,000 and $3,000 worth of clothes using her employee discount. Corporate policy sucked, so they actually got away with a good chunk of it. Years later, her mom came back trying to return everything, completely worn out and destroyed, and threw a fit, insisting she should get a full refund because her daughter had died. Guess who we could all see sitting in the car with her? Story 2. I'm a teacher, and I was on a committee to hire a new 5th grade teacher. I was showing her the ropes and observing her classroom behavior when I watched this idiot tell a student, "I don't like you very much. Figure it out yourself." The next thing I showed her was the door. During the exit interview, which basically happened as we walked to the door, I asked her to explain herself. She said about the student she didn't like, he was wearing designer jeans. You know his life is all peaches and cream, taking from us little guys. I asked, "Did he say anything inappropriate to you about money?" She replied, "No, but I know they're kind." Story 3. It was an IT position, and the guy supposedly had a BA in computer science with 2 years of experience in a relevant technical role. I wasn't the one who interviewed him. We quickly discovered that his computer skills were non-existent. We started asking questions until he broke down and admitted he'd lied on his resume because he wanted to make more money. His previous job had been installing drywall. We gave him a list of software he needed to download, available through a URL. He didn't know what to do with the URL, or even what a URL was. And from there, it all unraveled fast. He lasted about 3 hours, and the first 2 were just paperwork. Story 4. The job hours were from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. Our new hire showed up about 10 minutes late on his first day. Normally, that wouldn't be a huge deal, but it was his first day, and I had already pulled 3 other staff members into our 8 a.m. meeting so we could go over his training schedule. We were already in the meeting when the new guy walked in. He didn't apologize for being late. He just sat down as I was going over the training plan for the week. After a few minutes of listening to us discuss what he'd be doing, he raised his hand and said, "Can we reschedule the afternoon sessions for today and tomorrow? I have to leave at 11 today and 12:30 tomorrow." This was the first time I was hearing about any of this. I asked the 3 supervisors to give me a few minutes alone with him. Once they left, I started explaining that he couldn't just change his schedule without clearing it with management first. In the middle of that conversation, he got a text, looked down at his phone, and actually put his hand up like he was telling me, "I'll be with you after I finish reading this." As soon as he finished and looked back up at me, I said, "This isn't going to work. Please take everything you brought with you and don't come back. HR will email you your separation papers." He looked shocked and asked what he'd done wrong, so I told him. He tried to explain himself, but I just said it'd be best if he found another place to work. Story 5. I manage a coffee shop, Lunch Spot. A young girl came in fresh out of culinary school and had previous coffee shop experience. What could go wrong, right? On her first day, I had her shadow the other employees to get a feel for the POS system and the general flow of the store. Nope. Customers overwhelmed her, and she kept hiding in the back, leaning on the ice machine. Fine, whatever. She'd mentioned earlier that she loved baking, so I sent her to the kitchen to make some cookies. I'm super chill. I didn't even care what kind, as long as they were awesome and delicious. She had full creative control. Sometime later, she came out and admitted she didn't know how to make cookies and needed help. Now I was getting seriously frustrated. As the lunch rush hit, the front of house got slammed and I was needed out there. I had about 40 liters of soup in the back that just needed a bit more roux to thicken, so I asked her to handle it. Surely she could manage that. Soups and sauces are literally covered in the first week of the culinary program she supposedly attended. I went to the same one, by the way. Nope. She found a box of cornstarch and dumped the entire thing in dry. Soup ruined. Her shift ended shortly after that. Turns out I'd forgotten to get her contact info at the start of the day, so I had to message her on Facebook to tell her not to bother coming back. Classy, I know, but she was just one huge mess I couldn't even begin to fix. Story 6. I didn't fire this guy personally. I did one better. I arrested him. I'm a police officer in the UK, and I was assigned to help with a recruitment event at headquarters where applicants came in, listened to a talk, and took a few exams. Almost everyone showed up in suits or shirts and ties, except one. This guy came wearing a black polo shirt, black combat trousers, and tactical boots. Weird choice, made a terrible impression, but whatever. While they were doing the exam, I stepped outside for a smoke. All applicants had to park in a specific area, which happened to be right next to the smoking shelter. One car immediately stood out because it looked exactly like one of our unmarked vehicles. Same make, same color, everything. I got closer to check it out, and sure enough, it had radiator lights and a police-issue stab vest on the back seat. I figured maybe one of our officers had parked in the wrong spot. It happens. But after the exam ended, I watched everyone leave, and sure enough, the guy in the black polo shirt got into that unmarked car. I immediately jumped into a real unmarked vehicle and followed him. 2 streets later, I saw him turn on blue lights and drive straight through a red light. I overtook him, put my lights on, and blocked him in. He got out waving a fake warrant card, claiming he was on his way to an emergency. He was arrested for impersonating a police officer and turned out to be suspected of doing the same thing in about 3 other jurisdictions. Story 7. I was a corporate field manager for a big box camping store, and my job was to travel to new locations and help open new stores. That meant a lot of hiring, building, and stocking in a short amount of time. During the stocking phase, we don't wear uniforms, so it's pretty common that people don't know who's who. There were a couple of girls who stuck together and somehow managed to split the workload of one person and still do it half as fast. I walked over to give them some friendly guidance, but they didn't respond well. When I came back an hour later, they barely made any progress. I told them they needed to step up their game, and one of them got aggressive, saying, "Or what? Who the fuck do you think you are, talking to me like that? You ain't my boss." She got right in my face like something out of a World Star video and acted like she was about to fight me. Apparently, they'd forgotten that I was one of the interviewers, even though someone else had made the final hiring decision. I just said, "Well, actually, I am." Their faces dropped as I asked them to follow me. I took them to the office where my VP was waiting, and together we wished them well. They begged to keep their jobs, but I explained that laziness is bad enough. Insubordination, however, won't be tolerated. At that point, they told me to fuck off and stormed out. Story 8. I hired a guy as a mechanic. He owns several of the cars our shop specializes in and did well in the interview. But it didn't take long to realize his skills were strictly hobbyist level. His productivity was painfully slow. I always have new hires start on one of my own or a family member's vehicles before letting them touch a customer's car. In this case, I gave him a simple front brake job on my stepson's older model, an easy 20-30-minute task. This guy took almost an hour and a half, lost a part, cross-threaded a bolt, over-tightened, and broke another bolt. Not once, but 3 times, and asked way too many clueless questions. When he finally finished, I took the car on an extended test drive, including the freeway. There was a scraping noise that didn't go away. In fact, it got worse. I brought it back to the shop, lifted it on the hoist, and found both bolts holding one of the brake calipers were completely loose. Like, only 2 turns in. If one of those bolts had fallen out, the caliper would have swung into the wheel and locked it up without warning, which at freeway speeds would have caused the car to swerve violently and possibly roll over. My stepson was supposed to drive 450 miles back to college that night. I called the guy over, and he looked like a guilty dog. Keeping my composure, I explained what could have happened and told him I had to let him go. He understood, packed his tools, and left quietly. The funny part? About a week later, his sister, who had never been to the shop before, came in to drop off her car, the same brand we specialize in. She hadn't heard about her brother being fired. When I told her, she just shrugged and said, not surprising, before handing me the keys. Story 9. When I was working at a Japanese restaurant, we had to fire a new cook on his very first day because he showed up drunk. I was the delivery driver, and they asked me to pick him up from the bus station. When I pulled up, I saw him finishing off a tall can of Bud Light. I remember thinking, oh man, this isn't going to be good. He got in the car and seemed fine at first. I even offered him some gum, which he accepted and thanked me for. Once we got to the restaurant, I didn't see much of him since I was working out front, but I heard plenty. While the owner, Carol, and the other cooks were training him, he kept screwing things up, dropping stuff, knocking things over, just generally being a mess. Carol was a tough boss and liked to yell when people made mistakes, but I'd never seen her as furious as when this guy accidentally lit a rag on fire. That was it. She screamed, "You're fired. Get the fuck out," and told me to drive him back to the bus station, which turned out to be one of the most awkward car rides I've ever had. Story 10. I work in construction and run my own contracting business. We do everything from major renovations to redoing asphalt-sloped roofs, depending on whether I have the patience for it, because roofing seriously sucks. Once, I hired a laborer to help with cleanup. His job was simple. Take the old roofing we'd torn off, gather it up, and toss it into the dumpster I'd rented and placed in the alley. Super basic. I was doing that kind of work myself when I was 15 during summer break. That morning, I pulled up to the site with my buddy, who works with me. We were sitting in the truck, drinking coffee, and listening to the radio. Out back, I saw a can bum going through people's trash in the alley looking for recyclables. I didn't think much of it. Happens all the time. Then we got out of the truck, and the can bum turned out to be my new hire from Craigslist. Whatever. He had no teeth, no lunch, and spent the day bumming cigarettes off my buddy. Hard worker, sure, but knew absolutely nothing except basic manual labor. He wasn't even wearing work boots, just sneakers, so he was one nail away from a trip to the ER. By the end of the day, we'd finished the roof. I was doing the final touches, caulking, sealing, that sort of thing. I told the laborer to come up the ladder and remove the remaining bundles of material, plus grab the tools and radio from the roof. Simple enough instructions, right? A few minutes later, I heard this loud banging coming from the front of the house. I walked over to check, and this absolute idiot was throwing the bundles of roofing material off the two-story roof onto the homeowner's paving stone driveway. 80-pound bundles. And right next to them, my $160 skill saw, which he had also tossed down, now bent and ruined. I lost it, told him to get the hell off the roof, followed him down and fired him on the spot. I asked what made him think throwing 80-pound bundles and power tools off the roof was okay. He had no answer. I paid him cash for his time and told him to hit the road. Pretty sure he blew it all on a rock to smoke within hours. Thankfully, the driveway didn't crack, but asphalt shingles are made with tar, so they left nasty black scuff marks all over. Took me a while to clean it. I had to rub them out using gasoline from a jerry can. I've been in construction for years, and honestly, I've got enough of these messed up stories to fill a whole book when I finally retire. This was just one of the many. Story 11. I had to fire someone while we were literally doing their new hire paperwork. The store manager had interviewed him and then sent him to me. I was the operations manager to handle his onboarding documents. Right away, this kid starts trash-talking the store manager, other employees, and even asks if any fine bitches work at the front. Then he looks at the stack of paperwork and goes, "Man, are you seriously making me fill all this out? You're about as retarded as the store manager." I said, "Well, let's hold off on the paperwork then. I think we're going to go in a different direction with you, since you're clearly too professional for our business." It took him a second to realize he'd just been fired. Then he started acting like Eminem, cussing and trash-talking all the way out the door. See ya. Story 12. I'm a delivery driver, and also the head trainer at my store, mostly because I'm pretty good at it. I've always said there's a trifecta of qualities we look for when hiring drivers. Show up on time, have a clean driving record and your own car, and don't be a gigantic piece of shit. If someone has all three, they usually stick around and make great money. But a lot of new hires only have two. And since you need a car, it's pretty easy to guess which quality they're missing. We've had some characters over the years. One guy showed up his first day talking nonstop about how much he liked smoking weed and doing drugs. I mean, it's a pizza place, so whatever, but maybe don't lead with that on day one. A few hours later, he said a friend was dropping off his phone charger. The friend showed up, they talked for a bit, and the guy came back inside with no charger, but way more cash than he could have possibly made in 2 hours. Fired on the spot. At least 30 people just never showed up after their first shift. Some made good money and seemed excited to come back, then just ghosted. Drivers are expected to help in between runs, answer phones, fold boxes, make pizzas, wash dishes, etc. One new hire told us flat out that he was only hired to drive. My GM politely explained that's not how it works here. The guy refused, sat in the lobby, and played on his phone for 3 hours before realizing my GM had clocked him out. Suddenly he got all apologetic, but it was too late, fired. A girl from a rich neighborhood worked a couple of days and did fine until she had to deliver to a rougher area after dark. She didn't mind, but her mom sure did. The mom stormed in and demanded that her daughter only deliver to their neighborhood from now on. My GM said no, so the mom blew up. The girl was mortified, and her mom made her quit that night. This guy never even got hired, but it's still one of my favorites. He came in during our Friday night rush to ask for an application. We gave him one. He left. An hour later, he came back asking to see the manager. My GM said it wasn't a good time, so he left and came back with his mother. She demanded to see the GM, insisted we hire her son, mentioned he'd never had a job, and proudly added that she had filled out his application perfectly. All this while there was a line of customers and phones ringing nonstop. My GM promised to call later just to get her out of the store, and did call at 1:30 a.m. to tell her he wasn't interested. One new guy got hungry and decided to keep a customer's pepperoni pizza for himself, then told the customer we were out of pepperoni. The angry customer called us, fired as soon as he got back. Another guy went on his first solo delivery and then went home to take a nap. He thought drivers just went home until we called them for the next order. After an hour with no response, and considering he'd just delivered to a rough area, we thought something had happened to him and called the cops. They weren't thrilled either. An older guy worked with us for about a week. When it came time for a school delivery, he said he couldn't do it. When we asked why, he said, "Oh, I'm not allowed within 1,000 feet of children or places where they gather." One driver got caught adding $1 or $2 to every credit card tip at the end of the night. We found out the next day when the angry customers called. Another guy got stiffed on a tip and decided to piss on the customer's doorknob. The problem? The customer had a door camera, which I had pointed out to him earlier that week during training. We hired a high school girl to answer phones. She did great for 2 days, then called out on day 3, saying she had a family emergency. A couple hours after her shift was supposed to start, 2 cops showed up with a warrant. Apparently she'd beaten up another girl and fled the state. One guy got a customer's number and started sending her flirty texts. When we fired him, he said he thought he'd get laid a lot working here. An 18-year-old driver got an open container citation while working. He might have gotten away with it if he hadn't bragged about it the second he got back. And finally, one guy drove an hour out of the city to deliver a pizza because his GPS told him to. We didn't fire him for that. We fired him for threatening to beat up a shift leader for setting a drink on his car. Then he confirmed he said it and threatened the next manager who tried to talk to him about it. It's wild how many people can't clear the simple bar of have a car. Show up, don't be an asshole. Story 13. I worked my way up the ranks at a company that built custom enterprise apps for the health, safety, and insurance industries. We usually had a few projects going at once. One of them, however, had become a total disaster, way over budget and absurdly behind schedule. It was supposed to take 3 to 6 months. By the time I was promoted from lead software engineer to acting CTO, for reasons that'll be obvious, it had been dragging on for 3 years. The client was naive, the PM was shady, and our actual CTO was senile. My first task as acting CTO was to finally wrap this thing up. I called the developer and PM into a meeting and had finance and legal bring me everything related to the project: contracts, timesheets, correspondence, all of it. I asked the dev to print a copy of the current source code, mostly to get him out of the room, because he never shut up. While he was gone, I started going through the paperwork with the PM and noticed something odd. Both the dev and PM had pay adjustments that coincided with the project running 6 months over schedule. Apparently, management had decided to give the team a big hourly pay bump until the project was finished. The oversight for all this? A senile old man. I ran the numbers. If they had actually delivered that quarter, we'd have just about broken even. But that was 2 years ago. These two had been quietly bleeding the company dry ever since, basically writing themselves blank checks. Then the dev came back with the printed code. It was an enormous stack of paper, but as I started flipping through it, it became clear there was barely any real code at all. Just a tangled mess of C, not C++, which was our standard, filled with random partial HTML strings stored in hashtag-defined macros, sliced every 2,000 characters or so because of length limits. Some were valid enough if the app were supposed to output HTML, but it wasn't. Half of the code consisted of entire copied tutorials and reference pages he'd found online, embedded word for word. The rest was the documentation for the app, also chunked into hashtag-defined HTMLSDR1 blah 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 segments. What little actual code there was barely formed a skeleton of what the program was supposed to do, not even enough for a proof of concept. I told them plainly the project was nowhere near acceptable for the time and money spent, and that we'd spend the rest of the day creating a concrete timeline to finish it by the end of the quarter, about 2 months away. I excused myself to grab materials, but instead went to finance, legal, and HR. Together, we concluded the state of the project could easily qualify as fraud, both from the client's perspective and ours. HR boxed up their belongings and cut final checks while I went back to the meeting to finish the timeline. Finance and legal drafted a plan to keep our very patient client calm in case things went sideways. When HR arrived with 2 envelopes, I wrapped up the meeting by sliding the packets across the table and saying, "Or, we could just hire a contractor for 1/10 of what you two have milked the company for over the past 2 years and have this done by the end of the month. Here are your termination papers. HR has your things in the lobby. You're fired. Get out." That same day, I called the client, reimbursed them more than I care to remember, and promised a functional beta by a specific date. I dug through my list of reliable contractors, found 2 who worked well together, and had them start the next morning. They finished the job in 6 weeks, on time, though 2 years late in reality. Legal debated pressing fraud charges, but ultimately didn't. The rest of my time at that company was less stressful, though still full of facepalm moments. I eventually moved on to greener pastures, and have mostly managed to avoid being anyone's manager ever since, depending on how you define the word. Story 14. I work at a hotel as an HR manager, and I've had to fire people for all kinds of reasons. The usual stuff like unreliability, incompetence, or messing up the money. But this one guy, let's call him Dennis, was a special case. Dennis lasted exactly 3 days before being fired for theft, sexual harassment, drug use, and assault. It started on his first day. Our front office manager, FOM, was explaining the cash handling policy to him. As soon as Dennis heard he'd be responsible for money, he asked how much. She told him $500. His next question? "So what's the policy if the front desk gets robbed?" That was the first red flag. The FOM decided right then that Dennis would not be trusted with a cash bank. Later that day, one of our evening desk agents came in for her shift. Dennis immediately decided she was totally his type and started hitting on her aggressively, asking her out, pushing for her number. She told him to fuck off. After his shift, he went home, and she reported the incident to me and the manager. We agreed to give him a formal warning the next day. Day 2. He came in, got lectured on sexual harassment, signed a write-up, and went back to training. Not long after, he asked, "Where can I find the employee directory in case I need to contact someone with a question?" We didn't think much of it, until he copied down every phone number belonging to a female employee and started spamming them with unsolicited pictures from a second phone, along with the classy message, "Trying to find a room and fuck?" No one knew it was him yet, so it flew under the radar that day. Then came day 3, Judgment Day. Things started off fine, but around midday, I went out back for a smoke break with another manager. Guess who we found there? Dennis, casually smoking a joint. We asked if he was seriously smoking weed on company property. He just grinned and said, "Totally. You dudes want to hit." We told him he'd violated company policy and needed to come inside so we could start the termination process. We filled out the paperwork and told him to grab his things and leave. We'd mail him his final check. As he went to get his bag, he picked up the FOM's laptop from her desk and slipped it inside. Unfortunately for him, I was standing right there. When I confronted him, he turned around and punched me in the face before trying to run. He didn't get far. He crashed straight into our engineer, who tackled him and held him until the cops arrived. When the police searched his bag, they found the stolen laptop, the phone he'd used to send those pictures, 2 ounces of weed, and a bunch of paraphernalia. And that was the end of Dennis's 3-day career with us. Story 15. We didn't get rid of this guy in a day. It took about 6 months, mostly because my boss is way too forgiving. He was a new sales hire, and right from the start, both our accountant and I couldn't stand him. He was obnoxiously cocky about his resume and years of experience. The moment I saw him, I knew he was going to be a problem. Within his first week, he'd already caused multiple issues. He started treating our accountant like his personal assistant, telling her she had to fill out his insurance paperwork by Monday, or else. That attitude disappeared fast after she told him to do it himself and reminded him that she was the one who made sure he got paid. I work in IT, so I handle equipment deployment, and I also make the company's business cards on the side. I ordered his standard business cards, and he immediately complained. He didn't like the title layout and demanded I redo them. Fine, I reordered. When the second batch arrived, he declared the entire design shitty and said he'd be hiring a graphic designer to redo all of our branding, including the company logo. That nonsense ended quickly when our sales VP told him he liked our current logo just fine. Then came the laptop drama. I'd issued him a ThinkPad T530, at the time, a nearly new, top-tier work machine, 4th Gen i7, 8 GB RAM, 1 TB hard drive. Absolute tank. He hated it. He wanted a Dell touchscreen laptop I kept in the back for app testing. One day he came into my office saying, "The computer you gave me is underpowered. I want that Dell." The Dell had a weaker i5 processor, half the storage, and no business being his. I told him as much, but he insisted, "Well, it has Windows 8. I'm in sales. I need the most up-to-date operating system." I told him no problem. I'd upgrade his ThinkPad to Windows 8 the next day. He looked thrown off that I defused his nonsense so easily and left. Later that day, I walked past his office just in time to yell, "Stop." He was standing over his ThinkPad with a spray can, about to spray it into the keyboard. When I asked what the hell he was doing, he said, "Blowing dust out of my keyboard." I asked where he got the can. He said, "The server room." Problem, the can wasn't compressed air. It was WD-40. To this day, I have no idea how he got into the locked server room, or how someone who bragged about managing 500 people in a previous job couldn't tell WD-40 from canned air. Then he started complaining that he was a sales executive and deserved a private office. We had a vacant space in the back that used to be for our dev team, roughly 8 by 20 feet, still full of leftover desks. He started telling everyone that the space was being renovated just for him. When I told him another department was taking it, he ran to the sales VP to complain. Eventually, management caved and let him move in, but he had to share it with an entirely different department. When he finally got his desk, he turned his monitor so no one could see it, blocked himself in with filing cabinets, and refused to answer the phone if anyone else was in the room. People started murmuring about his work ethic. He began taking week-long vacations every month. No one knew if he somehow convinced management to pay him during those absences. After 6 painful months, he was finally fired. Turns out he'd generated 0 leads, 0 sales, and 0 referrals. We'd literally paid him to do nothing. When I got his ThinkPad back, it was crawling with viruses. I have no idea what he'd done to it, but I managed to save it. Honestly, the guy was just a cocky, clueless asshole. I still have a hard time believing someone that useless and self-absorbed actually had 3 bachelor's degrees in business like his resume claimed. Story 16. Let me introduce you to the trio of winners we hired at our local 15-minute oil change shop. My best friend and I worked at a place that rhymes with Spiffy Lube. I wasn't the smartest kid on earth, but at 18 I was well-spoken and knew my way around cars. They'd always been my hobby. After just 9 days on the job, the district manager came to us with a wild offer, our very own location to run. My buddy would be the GM, and I'd be his assistant, 2 kids fresh out of high school running a whole store. Why would they trust 2 teenagers with that? Easy, they were desperate. The store was the smallest in the chain, doing about 35 cars a day, and the previous crew had been pocketing cash payments without ringing them up. When the numbers didn't add up, corporate found out and fired the entire staff on the spot. So there we were, 2 teenagers, 1 temp from another store, and the mission to hire a new crew within 3 days. We interviewed 3 people, hired all 3. That's how desperate we were. Day 1, Janelle, mid-20s black guy from a rough neighborhood, a little racist, but honestly, he had a good heart. He told us he'd been a valet, so we put him in charge of driving cars in and out of the base. 7:30 a.m., first car of the day, a silver Toyota Camry. Literally the most basic, common car ever made. Somehow, despite all his valet experience, Janelle managed to slam it straight into the side of an identical silver Toyota parked next to it. District manager wanted him fired immediately, but since we were desperate for staff, he let it slide. Janelle was demoted to washing windows and vacuuming cars. Day 2, Jimmy, with an I. White guy, tatted up, long hair, bad stutter, claimed he was a mechanic. Super nice guy, so we figured he'd be perfect for the lower bay. The pit area where you drain oil and replace filters, no customer interaction required. First car rolls in at 8 a.m., and he's proud as hell of his work. We start the car, check the oil, looks fine. Then as the car is pulled out, oil pours everywhere. I run downstairs to see what the hell he did, and find that he'd crushed the new oil filter using the wrench like he was Hulk smashing a soda can. That's when I realized Jimmy didn't know the first thing about cars. I gave him a 5-minute crash course, sent him back down, and somehow he remembered what to do. I should have fired him right then, but if he wasn't down there doing the job, that meant I'd have to, and it was miserable work. So I kept him. Day 3, Josh. Clean-cut white kid, quiet, just needed him to wash windows while Janelle learned upper bay duties, checking and topping off fluids. We opened at 7 a.m. By 8, no Josh. By 9, still no Josh. Finally, around 9:30, I see him get off the bus across the street. I say, "Josh, you're 2.5 hours late on your first day." "What the fuck?" He goes, "The bus got me here now." I tell him, "Josh, I've seen 4 buses come and go already. Maybe you need to take an earlier one." His response, "Just, oops. That's it." But again, if he wasn't washing windows, I was. So to work he went. He showed up late like that all summer, and by the end, we found out he was a pill head, confirmed by his dealer, who, fun fact, was Janelle. And that's how we ran the shop all summer, the 2 of us and our A team. Somehow, against all odds, we pulled great numbers, kept customers happy, and had almost no major issues by the end. The owner loved us. My friend got promoted to a bigger store, and they offered me the GM position at ours. I quit the same day. There was no way I was making that my career. I went back to college, and now, 9 years later, I look back and laugh at that summer. Those first days were a mess, but damn, they made for some great stories. Story 17. She couldn't figure out what the tab key was. It was a basic data entry job. Literally, here's a paper with names and addresses. Copy it exactly into the system. That was it. We'd hired her through an agency, which supposedly gives candidates a basic computer literacy test. All we needed was someone who could type and follow simple instructions. But she would stop typing after every single field, grab the mouse, and manually click into the next box. We told her multiple times, it's much faster if you just press tab to move between fields. Every time we said that, she'd stop, cover her face with her hands, and groan. "Oh, this is too much. This is too hard." Like we'd just asked her to code a NASA launch sequence. To make things worse, she got up from her desk, with her trainer and manager sitting right next to her, and went into the bathroom to answer her phone every single time it rang. About 5 times that day. By noon, the manager called the agency and told them she could finish the shift but shouldn't come back tomorrow. The agency immediately called her cell phone. And of course, she got up and went into the bathroom to take that call too. A few minutes later, she came back out, sat down, looked at the manager, and said, "So, can I just leave now then?" It was one of the most painfully awkward days I've ever witnessed. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.